Hey guys, back with another video here. Thought I'd give you a little reading update. Before I do that, I just want to say thank you all for the response to my last video. I felt like it was a very positive response. I got, I don't know, a couple comments people left. That was nice. I have like over 30 subscribers now, which is a big, lot more than I had the last time that I uploaded anything here. So yeah, thank you guys for that. Definitely like leave a comment below. I'd love to chat with you guys. Love to know what you're reading, all that kind of stuff. I'll try to upload stuff here more frequently. Like I said in the last video, my biggest problem is that I hate editing. And so I think that what I'm going to try and do for going forward with this is just kind of make these videos where I'm, try and just do a single take where I just talk about the stuff and don't edit anything. So hopefully that doesn't annoy you too much, but I feel like it should be pretty candid. I hope that the noise from the road here isn't too bad while I'm filming outside. It's a really nice fall morning out here in Maine, so I felt like I would sit out on my deck and record, but hopefully it's not too loud. Maybe I should listen to the audio before I go ahead and film this whole video, but you know what? That's not the kind of YouTuber that I want to be. So I'm not going to do that. Anyway, let's get into my reading. Like I talked about in my last book, in my last video, not my last book. I've never written a book. I wish I wrote a book. My last video, I started talking about how I was going to read the empusium, however you say this, by Olga Tokarczuk. I did start this. I finished it. So I guess a little preface, like my history with Tokarczuk is that I have read Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of Our Dead, which structurally, I'll talk about this a little more later, I think, but structurally I think it's kind of similar to the empusium. I have no idea how you say this word, so I'm going to say it two ways probably every time that I say it. But anyway, I read that a couple years ago, Drive Your Plow, I enjoyed it. It didn't like blow me away. I know lots of people talk about how it was like the greatest book ever, but or not the greatest book ever, but it was like on lots of people's like top 10 of the year or whatever. I didn't think it was that great, but I liked it. It was a good book. I'm really interested in reading Flights and the books of Jacob or Jacob. Is it Jacob? But anyway, I'm interested in reading both of those. I think sound really good. The empusium came in the mail from Fitzcarraldo because I'm subscribed to Fitzcarraldo editions, so I just get books in the mail as they get released. So I didn't really know anything about it. I didn't even know that it was like coming out, really. It was kind of a surprise. Anyway, that's my history with Tokarczuk. Not that much. I've read Drive Your Plow is what I'm trying to say. So the empusium, right? This book is kind of a historical novel, kind of a horror story, kind of like a philosophical novel, feminist novel of ideas. It is set early 20th century, kind of like right before World War I. I think World War I is kind of starting to happen during the book, because at some points they're having these conversations and they're talking about like the stuff that's going on in the Balkans. So I think World War I is kind of it's kind of like just breaking out in the beginning of this, or over the course of this book. So this follows this guy, excuse my pronunciation, but he's a Polish guy. I think it's Mieczysław Wojnicz, something like that. But he has breathing troubles. He's probably consumptive. And he goes to this sanatorium in the Alps to take this like a rest cure, try and cure his tuberculosis, right? Anyway, that's like a thing. So the book opens with him traveling to this sanatorium And there's kind of this like creepy atmosphere from the very beginning of it. Like the opening 3 chapters really set this scene of this sanatorium being this kind of like really creepy and weird place. And like something is really off here. And so anyway, he gets to the sanatorium. He's actually not living at the sanatorium. He lives in this little house that's a little bit of a walk away from the sanatorium, called the Guest House for Gentlemen. That's kind of where the people who don't have enough money to stay at the real sanatorium, which has nicer accommodations, they stay at this cheaper Guest House for Gentlemen. So he's staying there with like half a dozen other consumptive people who are also going to the sanatorium. And over the course of the book, they have it's really kind of, there's kind of like two main arcs going on with the book. So on the one hand, there's this like horror element where there's something weird going on in this sanatorium, and the car's all gone. You don't really know. I think there's another one coming. You don't really know what's going on, and it's kind of, the atmosphere is really spooky. Tokarczuk does a really good job building this kind of like spooky, weird atmosphere at this sanatorium. So that's one element, is this like horror thing that's going on. The other thing that happens, and so I know there's a lot of stuff about how this book kind of relates to Thomas Mann's Magic Mountain. I've never read the Magic Mountain, so I can't really speak to that much. I mean, I know that the Magic Mountain takes place in a sanatorium. Aside from that, I don't really know much about it. But anyway, the other thing, what I'm getting at here, the other thing is that there's basically once Voynich gets to the sanatorium, he has all of these conversations with all of the other guest people there, and they're all kind of these like different archetypes of people. Like one of them is an artist, one of them is like an amateur scientist, Voynich himself is an engineer. And so they have all of these kind of like philosophical discussions among themselves about like the life and ethics and like the nature of art, the nature of technology, whether there's like progress in art and technology, all of these kinds of philosophical ideas. But ultimately, they all kind of end up coming back to this topic of women. So it's only in this sanatorium, there's or not, well, I don't know about the whole sanatorium. I think there are women in the sanatorium. But in the house that they're living in, the Guest House for Gentlemen, it's only men. There was a housekeeper who was a woman. She's in the beginning of the book. And then there's like a couple women that they see in the town occasionally, but for the most part, there aren't many women in the book. The women are really on the outskirts of the book, at least. They're at the periphery. So it's mostly men, and all of these conversations that the men have where they're discussing these really like deep philosophical issues and trying to like wheedle out the nature of life and reality and existence. Like ultimately all of their conversations end up making their way to discussions about women and about kind of how like women end up being like the root of all of the problems in the world in these discussions. Or they end up, women are always kinds of like exceptions to whatever things that they're saying, and exceptional in a bad way. Like basically, you know, like at one point they're talking about how like they're debating whether or not women have souls, and it's not like they're debating the existence of souls in general. Like it's taken for granted that men have souls, but the topic for debate is like, do women have souls? Or like another common thing is like women like can't control their desires. Like they're just ruled by their desires. They have no will of their own, basically. That's a common thing that they end up talking about. Or basically it's just like women are these like conniving, evil kind of group of people who are like out to disrupt the rational world and cause chaos, and they're not real rational actors in the world. They can't really interact in men's spaces. They're separate, and they're troublemakers. And so anyway, like as I was reading these things, like I was saying, like every dialogue ends up coming back to this kind of thing. And as I was reading them, it gets really like tiring at points, right? Because it feels like this over the top satire in some ways. But on the other hand, it also, as someone who has read a lot of like turn of the century stuff, like it feels, all of the discussions that Tokarczuk is writing feel very accurate. Like these are things that were being discussed a lot in that, like these are the currents of 19th century, early 20th century intellectual thought. Excuse me. Anyway, when at the end of the book, there's actually not even the end of the book, like after the book, in the end of the physical book, there's this author's note that talks about how all the misogynistic views on the topic of women and their place in the world are paraphrased from texts by the following authors. So all of the misogynistic views that have been espoused in these dialogues between all of these different gentlemen in the guest house, they're all paraphrases of things from Augustine of Hippo, Bernard of Cluny, William S. Burroughs, that's an interesting one, Cato, Joseph Conrad. I don't know why William S. Burroughs seems out of place in this list. Joseph Conrad, Charles Darwin, Emile Durkheim, Henry Fielding, Sigmund Freud, H. Rider Haggard, Hesiod, Jack Kerouac, D.H. Lawrence, Cesar Lombroso, W. Somerset Maugham, John Milton, Friedrich Nietzsche, etc., etc., etc. So she's paraphrasing Tokarczuk is paraphrasing ideas through these different characters that were really current in 19th century, early 20th century philosophical thought. And so it's really like it's kind of interesting, and I don't know how I feel about it, I think, because it reminds me, one of my favorite books that I've read in the last few years was Stefan Zweig's memoir, which I read a few years ago, which I can't remember the name of anymore. It's like the world of yesterday. Anyway, this is Stefan Zweig's memoir of kind of growing up. The part that I'm trying to draw a parallel between, at least, is his growing up not even growing up, but like coming of age in Vienna at the end of the 19th, early 20th century. Basically, like the turn of the 20th century, there's this really strong belief in the power of rationality, the power of art, in progress, basically, in science, in modernity, that all of these problems of the 19th century are going to be solved. That there's things are going to get better. And that basically everything, science, progress, modernity, art, we're going to solve all of these everything is going to keep getting better until everything gets solved, basically, and everything is good. And the intellectual currents that are espousing those ideas, right, are the same people who are saying those kinds of things are also the people who Tokarczuk is paraphrasing all of these horrible things about women, right? And so I think part of the point of this is that maybe not part of the point, but one of the things that I pulled out of it is that I'll wait for this car to go by. A lot of the intellectual currents of this kind of modernity, right? That's the word I want to use. A lot of these intellectual currents in modernity, in European modern, I'm using modernity not to mean things that are like contemporary or modern, but I'm talking about like the specifical, like the feelings of modernity in the late 19th, early 20th century. That when I'm talking about modernity, that's what I mean. And I would argue a lot of those feelings kind of underpin. That's really loud. A lot of those feelings underpin our intellectual currents today too, whether we're drawing from them or reacting against them. But anyway, a lot of the intellectual underpinnings of modernity, of modernism, are built on these foundations of these thinkers who are really like discounting women and actively like saying harmful things about women as well. And so in a lot of ways, like you could argue maybe that the modernist project is opposed to women, as in like it's set up in opposition to women. But I think and I'm conflating modernism with lots of different things here, but I think ultimately, like, I don't know. On the one hand, I feel like there's kind of this book feels kind of reactive against sort of like rationalism and Enlightenment thought, and kind of like how, the thinkers can have these really great ideas, but they're also still like basing their ideas on this, like, they're basing it in opposition to women, really. And I think that's a totally valid point, right? Like, obviously she's paraphrasing literally things that they're saying, and they're, denying that women have full, like, rational agency. Like, that's obviously incorrect. But at the same time, I don't know. I kind of don't like this reactionary response to rationalism and this, like, idea that we should just throw out the Enlightenment, because I feel like the Enlightenment and rationalism is kind of what gives us the ability to say that, like, yeah, like when you're saying these things about women not having rational agency, like, this is just not true, right? Like, it gives us an ability to argue against that stuff. And yeah, I don't know. Anyway, see, I mean, I've been talking about this for like 20 minutes. So there's basically, this book gives you a lot of stuff to think about, which is interesting. And that's what I like reading books for. So for that, it's very interesting. The one thing that I kind of feel weird about this book, and why, like, I wouldn't say that this is one of my favorite books of all time or anything like that. I don't even know. I may never reread this book. I don't know. But And I feel the same thing about Drive Your Plow as well. They have similar kind of a similar structure to both of them, where both of them sort of inhabit these genres. So Drive Your Plow was like a thriller mystery kind of thing. The Empusium is a horror story, espousedly. And both of them kind of like these genre elements. So in the Empusium, like the horror stuff, the atmosphere is really built up in the first couple chapters. All of the horror elements are kind of, like all of the tropes of the horror story kind of appear in the first couple chapters to like let you know, like, yeah, this is going to be a horror story. But then there's like 200 pages where really there's nothing about a horror story in here. Like there's still this spooky atmosphere that never goes away, but like nothing progresses in terms of the horror stuff for a few hundred pages where they're having these talks mostly. And I mean, things do progress. It's very slow though, which is fine. I prefer slowly paced books. But what I think feels weird about this and Drive Your Plow is it's kind of like the books are kind of bookended by these genre elements. So like the horror element gets really emphasized the first couple chapters, then it kind of slows down, but then it really ramps up again the last like couple chapters, where it's like, oh yeah, this is a horror book, and like let's wrap up these horror elements. So kind of, yeah, I don't know. I guess, yeah, that's my only criticism of it, is this kind of structural one. Otherwise, I liked it. What side am I on? I liked it. It was a good read. I enjoyed it. Recommend it. I liked it more than Drive Your Plow. I'll say that. I think it was more successful for me than that book. So that's that. That's the thing I have read. Another thing that I reread that I wanted to talk about. So I drove down to Massachusetts like a couple weeks ago, and I have an audiobook of Robert Aickman's stories. The Cold Hand in Mine, is that what the collection is called? Anyway, I've been really, really slowly going through that collection. Man, excuse me. And anyway, so Robert Aickman is a British horror writer from the 70s. I'm really on a horror kick for some reason. He's a British horror writer from the 70s who I was introduced to through this anthology called The Weird, which I recommend that anthology. Maybe I'll talk about it in another video. But anyway, in that anthology, there's this story called The Hospice, which is kind of about this guy. He's like this middle-class, kind of clueless British guy, as most Robert Aickman stories are, and he gets lost. He's out driving his car at night, and he gets lost and he runs out of gas. And he ends up staying the night at this like hotel where really weird things are happening. And then he kind of leaves in the morning and things are back to normal. Anyway, I liked that story when I read it, I don't know, a few years ago. That was my first Robert Aickman. I started looking for more of his stuff. It's really difficult to find Robert Aickman stuff in around here. I've never seen a Robert Aickman book at a used bookstore. I've never seen it at like a Goodwill or anything, but even like used bookstores, I've never found a Robert Aickman thing. I did end up ordering Compulsory Games, is like a collection that MYRB put out a few years ago. I ordered that and read that, really loved it, and I've been keeping my eye out for more Robert Aickman stuff. Anyway, the point that I'm getting to, I went on this trip to Massachusetts a couple weeks ago. On the drive back, I decided to listen to a story. It was The Hospice again, so I re-listened to The Hospice. And man, that story holds up so well. It's such a good story. Like if you want like a horror story, way better than the Empusium, if that's what you're looking for. I recommend go read it. It's like, it'll take you like 30 minutes to read it, maybe. It's a pretty short story. I'm sure if you just Google it, you can find it online. But it was so, especially having read more Robert Aickman now, like there's so much stuff that I feel, I don't know if I didn't pick up on it the first time or if I just like have forgotten about it in the years since I read it. But there's all these like weird little details in the story and all of these things that are so yeah, he's just a, I don't even know how to explain it. I really love Robert Aickman. Anyway, there's there's, after his car breaks down, he gets bit. He gets bit by a cat, which I don't remember that from the first time that I read it. But it's also, it's like, is it actually a cat? Because like the story, I don't even remember if it's told in the first person or I think it's told in like a close third person perspective. So it's kind of, you're getting like free and direct discourse through the main character. I don't remember what his name is. Or maybe it may not be free and direct discourse. It may just be, I think it's just like a close perspective. Like you're getting things through his point of view, but it's in the third person, I think. But anyway, like he seems to think that he assumes that it's a cat that bit him, but like the narrative lens never actually shows that it's a cat, and like it's kind of ambiguous if it was a cat that bit him or like what this thing is, because it's kind of like he was out checking his car, like he got out of the car to check what had happened or something, and then this thing bites him and just runs into the bush and he doesn't find it again. And he thinks it was a cat, but then he's got, like, over the course of the story, he's got this, like, festering wound on his leg, and he, like, doesn't, it seems like it's getting worse and worse. Which, I mean, cat bites are bad. They got a lot of bacteria in their mouth, so it could be a cat. I don't know. Anyway, that was weird. And then there's also this scene where, like, I mean, there's this dinner scene where he gets into the hotel and they're eating dinner, and it's so weird, and like it seems like they're trying to like fatten him up. Like they just keep feeding him so much food and he refuses to eat it, and the waitress like throws the plate against the wall and shatters it, and it's like and then like the proprietor comes out and kind of like tries to pick up the mess, and it's weird. There are people, all the other guests are like chained to the tables. And then he goes in this back room, and one of there's like this woman who's like the only like younger person, and she's like so beautiful, and he's like entranced by her, and I want to say they were sitting on like a chaise longue together, but I don't think that's the case. But in my head, this is like how I saw it, and she's like sprawled out over him, and at one point she like takes his hand and is like groping her breast with his hand, and and she's just like, she's coming on to him so strongly, and like the guy is like, it's really weird. Which Robert Aickman has all of this is another thing where like I feel like there's all of these like sexual undercurrents in all of Robert Aickman's stuff where I don't know, it's kind of like very Freudian, like anything can kind of start taking on these weird sexual elements, and it's like his characters like can't control. Like there's this base like primal sex drive urge undergirding everything, kind of. Anyway, highly recommend The Hospice. You should read it. So what I've been reading since then, I picked up. Well, wouldn't say I picked up. I've had this book for a while. I bought this book earlier this year, actually, there's a used bookstore in Montague, Massachusetts called The Book Mill. Which is a really lovely location. If you're in Western Massachusetts, you should check it out. There's a couple little shops there, and there's a nice little like cafe you can get some drinks at and stuff. Anyway, I got this Library of America Tales by Lovecraft. I'm not too familiar with Lovecraft. I know him mostly from The Weird. I read the Dunwich Horror in The Weird. And I liked the Dunwich Horror mostly because it seems like, well, I wouldn't say mostly because, but I think one of the large appeals of the Dunwich Horror to me was that it seems like it takes place in an area of Massachusetts that I grew up in. It's in like fake towns, but the way that they're described, it's like that's where I grew up. So I like that. Anyway, I've started reading these. I kind of I have a weird relationship with horror because I really want to like horror books, and I think more than any other, I'm not a big genre reader. I dislike most fantasy that I've read. I would say that I don't typically like sci-fi either, especially not like hard sci-fi. But there are some, like I really like Ted Chiang's story collections that have come out pretty recently. There is some sci-fi that I like, but for the most part, I would say like I'm definitely not a big sci-fi reader. Definitely not a big fantasy reader. Horror, though, I find really appealing in some ways, but the stuff that I dislike, and the reason I think I like Robert Aickman so much, so like I've read a couple of stories in here so far. The first one I read was this story called The Outsider, which, I should say, so this contains, I think it contains 22 stories by him, and they're arranged here in chronological order, and it doesn't seem like it's that thick of a book, but really, this is like 800 pages. It's printed on like Bible paper. It's really thin. And anyway, I don't want to read 800 pages of Lovecraft right now. So I'm trying, I was trying to think of a strategy where I can read some of these and get a good sampling of them. I don't really want to read them in order because they're in chronological order here. So if I just like read a third of these and I read them in order, then I'm kind of like only getting a sampling of Lovecraft's early work, and I kind of want to like, maybe I'll like his later work more than his early work, or vice versa. Like, I feel like I want to get a broader range of them. So anyway, there's a note on the text in the back of this, and all of the stories in here are really collected from 3 different short story collections. And it like tells you in the note on the text which stories come from which collection. So I think what I'm going to do, and what I've started doing, is just reading stories from the first collection, which is called The Dunwich Horror, and includes The Dunwich Horror, which is the story that I originally read by Lovecraft that I like and which I'd like to reread. Anyway, the story I read the other day, The Outsider, what was I talking about? Oh, so The Outsider is a great example of like the stuff that I really like in horror, and also the stuff that really frustrates me. Which is, so The Outsider is about this guy, this narrator who is talking about how like he grew up basically completely isolated. He doesn't remember his parents. He never remembers seeing any other people in his entire life. He's always lived in this like this place that doesn't have sunlight. He's never seen sunlight, never seen any other people, never seen anything really. He's lived this completely sparse, isolated existence. The only thing that he sees in his world is this big tower that's going up to the sky, and the tower has like, it's got stairs wrapping partway around it, but then the stairs stop and it's just like bare wall going up into the sky until you can't see it anymore. And one day he decides that he's going to scale this tower. And so he does that. He climbs up the tower. He pushes through a door at the bottom and comes out, and he thinks he's going to be on top of this tower, and he's going to see sunlight for the first time, and he's going to look out on this vast world below him. But that doesn't happen. He gets out there, and there's like a door. He's in some kind of room. There's a door. He goes outside, and he's on flat ground at that point. And the sky is above him. He sees the sun at this point, I think. Or maybe, I think it was nighttime, because I remember there's like descriptions of the moon. So he still doesn't see the sun, but he sees moonlight for the first time. And he's on solid ground, and in the distance, there's this I think it was a castle, and there's like a party going on. He can hear people talking, and this is the first time he's ever heard people in his life. And so he wants to go, he's never heard people before, so he wants to go interact with these people. He's lonely. And he opens the door to this castle. He steps in, and all of the people in the party just start screaming and freaking out, and they all flee. And he's looking around everywhere, the narrator is looking around and he's like, what, like he thinks like the most unimaginable horrific sight ever must be around here somewhere. Like, what is causing these people to be so scared? And he's looking around and he can't find anything. And then he sees under these like golden arches, under, not McDonald's, there's like this golden archway, and underneath it he thinks he catches a glimpse of this like horrific sight, and he slowly walks towards it, and he reaches out his hand, and like he meets solid glass. And then at that point, so if it was me, like if the story ended right there, it would have been a perfect horror story. It would have been great. But it goes on for another page where Lovecraft explains to us that this is I realized at this point I was looking at myself in a mirror. Like, no shit, dude. Like, and I kind of feel like the ends of these stories, and a lot of like 19th century, early 20th century, I don't even know about maybe modern horror is better at this. Aickman doesn't do this. This is why I like Aickman, is Aickman revels in ambiguity, which I love. But I get this sense in these earlier horror writers that like they're afraid to let the reader, they don't give any agency to the reader. Like they gotta make sure I understand this is a mirror, right? Like, you get it? Like he's the horrible thing. He's looking at himself, and it's like, yeah, I get it. You don't have to drill that into me. I'm not stupid. Anyway, I find that frustrating because up until then, I love the story. Like, the atmosphere is great. It's really like his writing. Lovecraft's writing style is so antiquated. It's so Victorian. Like, if this was, it even reminds me of Mary Shelley. Like, he's writing in a style that's like 100 years old at the point where he's actually writing, which is really weird. Like, yeah, like this is coming out contemporary with like, you know, Virginia Woolf and Joyce and D.H. Lawrence and modernism. And like in one of the stories, he's talking about like cubism and futurism, but he's writing in it in this prose that sounds like it could have come from 1830. I would not say that Lovecraft is a good prose stylist, but he's a very interesting one, and I find it interesting. Anyway, this video is going on like almost 40 minutes now. That's crazy. I was trying to make this really short, but I like the stuff. I like talking to you guys. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it up here. So I've read like 4 stories in this, gonna read more. Actually, I got a question for you guys to wrap this up. So these Library of America editions, first of all, I love the actual feel of these books. They feel so good. They're so pleasant to read. One thing I hate is these dust jackets on it. So obviously, I'm not a cretin, right? Like, I take the dust jacket off when I'm reading the book, because who leaves a dust jacket on when they're reading a book? That's insane to me. And look at how lovely this looks. Like, it's a beautiful book without that ugly dust jacket. So my question is, how do you guys store this? Do you leave the dust jacket on your shelf, or do you take it off and just put this on your shelf naked, no dust jacket? Because I feel like it looks so much nicer this way than this thing. I guess from the spine area, this doesn't look too bad. It's really these things. I don't think these are very appealing. Anyway, I put it on the shelf with the dust jacket, mostly because I'm like, I don't want to throw this thing out, right? Because that feels kind of sacrilegious to me. I don't want to throw it out, but then what am I going to do with it if I don't leave it on the book? But then I end up with a book that I think is uglier than it without it. So I don't know. Anyway, I'll try and get back to you guys at a faster cadence, maybe. Although if I keep making videos that are 40 minutes long, it's not going to be a faster cadence. I gotta start speaking more quickly or something. Anyway, see you guys later. Thanks for watching.